The true horror history of Sunshine City, shadows beneath the sun. Welcome to the channel, truth seekers and night owls. Tonight, we're diving into one of Tokyo's brightest landmarks that hides one of its darkest secrets. Sunshine City, that glittering complex of malls, hotels, offices, an aquarium, and the iconic Sunshine 60 skyscraper, stands as a beacon of modern Japan. But what if I told you this place of light was built directly on the blood-soaked grounds of Sugamo Prison? What if the laughter of shoppers and tourists echoes over the unmarked graves and execution sites of war criminals, tortured souls, and forgotten victims? This isn't just urban legend. This is the suppressed history, the eyewitness accounts, and the ongoing paranormal activity that developers and officials have tried to bury. The bloody birth of Sugamo Prison, 1895 to 1945, let's go back to the beginning. In 1895, on the outskirts of what was then a quiet area in Ikebukuro, authorities constructed Sugamo Prison. It started as a standard detention facility but quickly earned a reputation for brutality. Prisoners endured harsh conditions, solitary confinement in damp, windowless cells, and brutal interrogations. Guards whispered of inmates driven mad by isolation, their screams echoing through the stone corridors at night. During the early 20th century, the prison expanded. Political dissidents, common criminals, and those who opposed the rising militarism of Imperial Japan found themselves behind its walls. But everything changed after World War II. Following Japan's surrender in 1945, the Allied occupation forces took over Sugamo Prison. It became the primary holding facility for Class A war criminals awaiting the Tokyo trials. Figures like Prime Minister Hideki Tojo, who oversaw many of the empire's atrocities, were imprisoned here. The prison swelled with high-ranking military officers, politicians, and commanders accused of war crimes across Asia. Executions became routine. On December 23, 1948, 7 Class A war criminals, including Tojo, were hanged on the prison grounds. Their bodies were cremated or buried nearby. The gallows stood as a grim centerpiece. Reports from the era described the condemned men's final words, defiant or broken, and the heavy silence that followed each drop. Some guards later claimed the nooses still swayed on windless nights, and footsteps echoed in the empty execution chamber long after the trapdoors were sealed. Inside the cells, conditions were hellish. Inmates spoke of ghostly figures, perhaps the spirits of earlier prisoners or victims of the war crimes they committed, visiting them in the dead of night. One former guard, in a rare post-war interview that was quickly suppressed, described hearing collective moaning from the cell blocks, as if hundreds of voices were crying out in languages he didn't recognize. The erasure and the rise of Sunshine City, 1970s. By the late 1950s, the last war criminals had been released or transferred. Sugamo Prison was closed in 1958. In 1971, the Japanese government demolished the remaining structures as part of a massive urban redevelopment project. The goal? To wipe away visible reminders of the wartime past and build a shiny new future for Tokyo. By 1978, Sunshine 60, once Asia's tallest building, and the surrounding Sunshine City complex had risen on the exact site of the prison and its execution grounds. Officially, it was progress. The land was cleansed and blessed. But those who worked on the construction sites tell a different story. Construction workers reported tools vanishing overnight, only to reappear covered in what looked like old blood. Heavy machinery would shut down for no reason near the old execution area. One foreman allegedly quit after seeing a man in an old military uniform standing motionless on the scaffolding at midnight. The figure had no face when he approached. Multiple workers complained of sudden, crushing feelings of dread, headaches, and nightmares of being hanged or locked in tiny cells while water slowly rose around them. When the complex opened, the hauntings didn't stop. They evolved. The modern hauntings of Sunshine City shoppers and office workers today experience the unexplained. Security guards in the mall report shadowy figures in outdated clothing walking through closed stores after hours. Elevators in Sunshine 60 notoriously stop on floors that don't exist or open to reveal empty corridors that feel ice cold, even in summer. Some riders hear whispered conversations in old Japanese dialects or the distant sound of marching boots. The most infamous stories come from the upper floors and the observation deck. Cleaning staff have found handprints on windows from the inside, prints that belong to no living person and vanish by morning. Office workers staying late describe hearing cell doors slamming and men begging for mercy in the ventilation system. One prominent businessman, who refused to be named in a Japanese paranormal documentary, claimed he was pinned against his desk by an invisible force while a voice in his ear recited names of Chinese and Korean villages destroyed during the war. Night security personnel tell of the man in a suit. He appears on CCTV as a well-dressed figure from the 1940s wandering the parking garages, areas built over the old prison yard. When approached, he simply fades into a wall. Paranormal investigators who have snuck in, illegally, have captured EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, saying things like, "I did nothing wrong," and "release me." Parents visiting the aquarium with children report kids pointing at the sad soldiers standing in empty corners. One mother filmed her daughter waving at nothing, saying, "Bye-bye, Tojo-san." The footage briefly went viral before being memory-holed. Even the nearby Higashi Ikebukuro Central Park, partially built on the grounds, has its share of horrors. Joggers at dawn describe feeling watched by figures partially buried in the grass. Dog walkers say their pets refuse to enter certain patches of land and growl at invisible presences. Eyewitness accounts and suppressed incidents. A former Sunshine 60 tenant, a salaryman who worked there in the 1980s, shared his story anonymously online before deleting it. He worked late one night and heard marching in the hallway. Thinking it was security, he opened his door. Instead, he saw a line of emaciated men in prisoner uniforms shuffling past his office, their heads bowed. One turned and looked directly at him, his eyes were hollow sockets. The man suffered a nervous breakdown shortly after. In the 1990s, a group of high school students on a dare spent the night in a service area. They reported being awakened by the sound of a trapdoor banging repeatedly, followed by the smell of burning flesh. One student allegedly never recovered and was institutionalized. Recent years haven't been kinder. In 2023 to 2026, there were increased reports of people feeling suddenly suicidal or overwhelmed with guilt while in the complex, emotions with no apparent cause. A stabbing incident near the site made headlines, with some locals muttering it was the land demanding blood again. Paranormal teams from around the world have tried to investigate. Many leave with more questions than answers, their equipment drained or malfunctioning near the old Gallows location, now underneath retail space. Some claim orbs, apparitions, and full-body manifestations on video, footage that mysteriously corrupts or gets lost. Why it matters: a land that remembers. Sunshine City represents Japan's post-war economic miracle, a place of consumerism, entertainment, and forgetting. But the dead don't forget. The souls of the executed war criminals, their victims crying out for justice, and the ordinary prisoners who suffered there are said to be trapped, their energy fused into the very concrete and steel of the buildings. Developers performed Shinto blessings and rituals during construction, but many believe they were insufficient. The land itself, soaked in pain, death, and unacknowledged history, rejects the shiny facade that if you ever visit Sunshine City, enjoy the views, the shopping, and the lights. But stay alert. Listen for the echoes in the elevators. Notice the cold spots on a warm day. And if you feel a hand on your shoulder or hear a whisper in a language you don't understand, don't turn around too quickly. The prison may be gone, but Sugamo never truly left. The sunshine above hides eternal night below. What do you think? Have you experienced anything strange at Sunshine City or similar sites? Drop your stories in the comments, and if you want more deep dives into haunted history built on blood, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Stay safe out there, and remember, some places were never meant to be rebuilt upon. Sweet dreams.